Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and this is the Connected Educator Cafe. Sylvia Martinez and Jackie Gerstein are here. Welcome to both of you. Neither of you responded.
Oh, I thought you were kept talking. Hello.
Yes, you know, I had a professor in college with the last name Gerstein, and so I always notice when people say your name differently than that. Well, so this is with fewer people, it's more of you for me to interact with, so that's positive on my side. I can't think of two people I would rather spend an hour with than the two of you, so it's kind of a bonus for me. We'll get started. We've got Davila and Kay in the room, and we'll just touch lightly on all that's going on for Connected Educator Month. Maybe there's some fatigue. Maybe there's some Connected Educator fatigue. Ed Connector is the cool project from Mark Sylvester. Really worth taking a look at. There are the book clubs. There's the badge of the day. You can get a badge for being here tonight. And of course, we have lots of really fun conversations going on in the cafe. So tomorrow night, Peggy George and Jason Organ. Should be lots of fun. So who's here? Jessica K. Davila. You can use the star to the left of the map, and you can click on the map. Okay, so Sylvia, you're in LA. Jackie, you're in Albuquerque? Is that what you said? I should know that, I don't. Maybe we lost Jackie.
There we go. Oh, my star disappeared. What happened?
There you are, Jackie, you're back. Okay, so here's how we've been doing this. The idea is for each of you to take about 5 minutes and just tell us first kind of about your backstory. Who you are, how you got to be where you are, maybe some things people wouldn't know about you. This is a chance to kind of share your story. So, Jackie, you're at the leftmost of my video screen, so let's start with you.
Hi.
Jack.
So I want to talk about it in context of maker education, because that's what tonight, it's actually, is it called maker? I think it's STEM, right? It's a STEM focus.
We're not being really careful about following those guidelines necessarily.
Oh, good, okay. And I'm going to even expand it to be experiential education. And I was one of those, and Steve knows my story, I was one of those that school was incredibly painful for me from elementary through graduate school. And I love this story. I took a course on outdoor education, and part of that course we had a week-long environmental ed. They used to take kids to these environmental ed centers, and it was 6th graders, and we got our own group. And we did things like to study history. We made butter, and we looked at the gravestones, and that was in a local old cemetery. To study streams, we went and did to study biology, we went to stream, and we looked at the critters in the stream. And I'm like, and I watched the magic occur with this group of kids who just, their eyes were lit up the whole time. My eyes as a 20-year-old were lit up the whole time, and I went, wow, you know, where was all this when I was growing up? And I know Sylvia will get to her book, but I ended up being able to teach some gifted kids a few years back, and it was just natural for me to bring in STEAM activities, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and it worked for them, and it worked for me, and the days went fast, and I just said recently at the Reform Symposium over the weekend, I said a good sign of a good class is that kids moan at the end of the day going, do we have to go home, rather than running out of the door as fast as they can. And these kids always would say, can we stay in for recess? Can we stay in for lunch? Because we were doing such exciting activities. And I actually put together, and I've recently done this workshop based on some of my experience with the gifted kids, and I'll put it in the chat. So it's a full lesson plan called From Puppets to Robots, and I'm doing it at the local makerspace in Santa Fe. They created a makerspace at the Children's Museum, and last week I did it as a 4-hour PD workshop for teachers in Idaho. They got a choice. I had about 12. And to watch the magic that happened, even with these teachers, they were engaged the whole time, and the guy who put it on actually was in the session, and I said, look around. Every single teacher is engaged, and they have the same magical look in their faces as the kids. And I love, and that's why I wanted to come on with Sylvia, that people are jumping on this invent to learn and this STEAM and maker education, because it's all there. I mean, and I integrate all of them on the computers, and then doing hands-on, and then coming back and discussing it, and it's just the mix of it all. We're just have a perfect time to do this. And my other thing I tell teachers, and then I'll give it over to Sylvia, is that I think teachers need to create classes they wish they had when they were in elementary school, and I think they forget that. How many of them wanted to be in these tight little desks having a teacher talk at them or filling out worksheets? And I like that magic, and I want to create that, and I'm into educational reform because I don't want kids to have to suffer the way I suffered when I was a kid, and this is just rich. We're just the perfect storm of being able to really implement all this in the classroom. So
I have a question.
My little more than 2 cents.
So I do this workshop where we talk about our deepest learning experiences. It was one of the most profound things Sylvia ever went through. I think she and Gary talked about it for days afterwards. Not. But in one of these sessions, I had somebody talk about an experience that he had going to summer camp. And he talked about every year they'd go to camp, and one of the kids became a professional archer, and the other. So I said to the group, what were the conditions that led to that deep learning? Why did you say that was deep learning? And he named them all. It was, annual. It was hands-on. And I said, it still feels like one is missing. And it took about 10 minutes, and they still couldn't come up with it. And I said, what about the fact that it was outdoors? So Jamie McMillan talks about this in her book, Legendary Learning, that being outdoors is a critical part of learning. Is that a part of your story, too? Is that a part of what happened for you?
Oh, definitely. But where I had that come home to me is I used to take actually juvenile delinquents out on 3-week wilderness courses, and magic happened. I took hundreds of kids out, and I believe all of them except maybe 2 were puppy dogs inside. And something happened to these kids who, a lot of them were felons, major crimes. They were in juvenile hall, and something happened magical outside. But what I did was try to recreate that. I did it with a group of teachers, and what a teacher said to me that was really profound to me is, she said, you design activities so well they don't all need to occur outdoors. That the outdoors is uncomfortable for some people. And I love being outdoors. It's part of my life. And I don't think it's required. I'd love to see I think all kids should be getting outdoors part of the time. But I think if it's rich enough, and that's what I like doing. And if you look at that link again, that wiki spaces, you'll see every lesson has a huge hands-on component to really make sure everybody's engaged in an authentic, creative, innovative, hands-on type of activity. And I see, I had a guy in my PD workshop who was probably about 70, and he got into it as much as the other folks did. So I hope I'm stepping around that. Yeah, that's what it is, Kelly. That's a nice way to, she says, it stimulates the senses, which in turn encourages open, creative learning. So I think that's what it is. That's a good way to put it. It's whole body engagement. It's fully sensory awareness. And the outdoors naturally does that, but I think if you're a good facilitator, you can create similar conditions inside. That was a long answer to your question.
Okay. So Sylvia, I'm going to make Jackie go back and talk about her background. So you can do whatever you want here, but either way, I'm going to at some point ask you to tell about your background. You can either riff on what Jackie just said, or you can tell us sort of about how you've gotten to where you are and what you do.
Well, I definitely want to get back to the outdoor point. And, you know, what I was thinking as Jackie was talking was, it's always interesting to me about the personal learning stories of educators. And I find that a lot of educators fall into these two camps. The Jackie story. She's an educator because she wants to fix what was broken in her own education. She wants to remediate. She wants to, you know, provide kids with something that she felt was lacking. And then for a lot of educators, it's the other side. They had a great education, and they want to replicate the good parts, the amazing people they met, the mentors who changed their lives, and they're in education to replicate something. And I think sometimes we have to tell these personal learning stories to make sure we're talking the same language, because, you know, our personal learning stories color everything we do. I have a different story than Jackie. I was a very good student. I was one of those kids who did everything I was asked. I was compliant. If I had any thoughts about something was wrong, I kept them to myself, because that's what you're supposed to do. I got good grades. I, you know, was good in math and science, but I was good in English and all this kind of stuff. Went to engineering school and really found myself in learning how to solve problems in the world. Came out of engineering school a very confident person. Went to work in aerospace and actually had a part in the GPS satellite navigation system. And that's a touchstone for me, is that, you know, a kid who came out of engineering school walking into a very high-tech, high-powered theoretical research project, and I didn't know anything about navigation, but I had the background to be able to tackle problems. And I use that kind of grounding in a lot of what I do. When I got more interested in education, mostly because of my own children, I mean, how can you not watch babies and be amazed at how people learn? I started to reevaluate my own education, because when you do well in school, you're constantly told that you're smart. Not that you're good at school, but that you're smart. And what happens is a lot of people believe that if other people could just see what's going on in my head, they would know the same things I did. And it took me a long time and a lot of reading smart people on, you know, learning theory and constructionism to realize that's not how learning happens. And that trying to replicate the good education I had and the things I saw in my head was the absolute opposite of what other people needed to learn. Because learning happens inside the learner. So we're constantly trying to make learning happen by doing all these outside things. But what needs to happen is inside of the learner. And one of the points we make in our book, and thank you guys for mentioning Invent to Learn, is that we talk about, you know, people say things like personalized learning. Well, all learning is personal. There is no other kind of learning. And what we try and do in school is create environments, indoor, outdoor, wherever they are, where those kinds of connections can happen inside the learner's head. And so they can gain knowledge and access to the big ideas that we all want kids to know and understand in the world. And so they can feel confident that they can solve problems. So one of the things that brought me back around to education is wanting to help other people have experiences that were good for me, and looking at schools and saying, this just isn't the way that scientists really work. This isn't the way engineers really work. We need to give kids multiple kinds of experiences, lots of hands-on, lots of experiences that help them connect the truths in our world and help them solve their problems. And that's one of the reasons we wrote the book, because some of these new tools and technologies really can help make that happen in classrooms.
So, how much of this relates to our kind of natural inclination to want to give knowledge back sequentially when we acquire it non-sequentially. Right? Typically, we encounter a problem, we figure things out, we're mixing from here and there, then we kind of figure things out, and they go in a sequence, and so we want someone to get it back sequentially. Is that a part of what happens?
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, when we're trying to teach someone something, we try and simplify it down to the basic level. Unfortunately, when you're, say, following, you know, a recipe, you want to follow the recipe exactly and replicate exactly, you know, the steps that make the cake come out correctly. Learning doesn't happen like that. So we're using kind of incorrect models of how machines work, of how you know, other systems work, how businesses work, to try and describe learning, and they don't really apply. And the sort of step-by-step breakdown model of teaching doesn't result in better learning. And yet, it seems to be the most straightforward and efficient way to transmit information. So we persist and just hope if we do it better, different steps, louder, softer, we make up a song about it, that something's going to sink in. And, you know, unfortunately, we lose too many kids in that process.
Okay, let's quickly, I want to ask you a question about invent to learn, not the in-depth, but just the first question that comes to my mind. You know, I kind of watched the makerspace movement. I had Dale Doherty on, you know, went to a maker fair. I didn't expect this book to come from you and Gary. Not that it's not brilliant coming from you and Gary, but it was kind of out of the blue when you told me about it on the radar. And so what's the connection with the work that you've done and Gary's done with your being voice for this in this first book?
You always ask the most interesting questions, Steve. No one else has asked that. You know, in some ways, it was an opportunity to talk about a subject that's near and dear to both our hearts, which is experiential learning, project-based learning, combined with computational technology. To me, the magic of the maker movement is what we described in our book as game-changer technologies. You know, it's great to make things, but computation is the Rosetta Stone. The idea that you can make intelligent objects, that you can program, is a switch that I hope the book makes from just saying, well, building anything, you could build, you know, a mission out of sugar cubes is good, but using computational technologies has the possibility of really taking it to the next level. So, you know, I think the maker movement coming on at this time with all these tools and technology and using the internet in such a vital way to share ideas and problems and solutions, it was what Gary says, you know, Gary says this may be the last hope to revitalize progressive education. The things we know work in schools. These tools and materials and the idea and watching the maker movement and taking the lessons from the maker movement can be something that opens teachers' eyes once again to the possibilities of the progressive education ideals that people have always known. I mean, people from Maria Montessori and, you know, John Dewey, they may not have had the technology. You know, they may have had the theory, and maybe now we have the technology. But it's certain technologies, I think, are a little higher up on the ladder than others.
I want you to think about, not answer right now, but after we do an exercise, I want you to think about influential voices in the last 30 years. And because I'm thinking immediately of Seymour Papert, right, and I'm thinking of but I'm also wondering other voices that we wouldn't think of naturally. Like, does Ivan Illich play here? Does who's the guy? Neil Postman. I mean, are there other sort of non-technical voices that play into this kind of larger historical thread? Okay, but before we go there, let's ask our group the most interesting things that you learned today. So this is a group activity. You can all respond. You can use the whiteboard. There's a tool, the fourth icon down on the left side of the whiteboard is the letter A, and you can actually click on it and type on the whiteboard, or you can put something in the chat. Something that you learned today that was useful, interesting, valuable. I love being an HTML hacker. You'd be shocked at how much of the virtual conferences that I hold actually depend on these massive spreadsheets I create with HTML code that automatically builds pages for me. And I discovered a little HTML trick today that I loved. And so I love finding something that becomes useful that I can hack with over and over again. What did you learn today? The importance of being outside to learn. I really like Jamie McMillan's book. It's called Legendary Learners. And she looked at a variety of people for whom learning was their life and what were the commonalities. Oh, and one great one in her book was that legendary learners typically were able to shift away from something that they had been doing to something completely new without a penalty. That they were not required to keep doing something that ended up not being what they ultimately did. Anybody else with a big learning moment? We're a we're a sad crew, aren't we? I know we learned more than that today. Learned about the hour of code effort from csed.org. So Kelly, you want to take the mic and tell us what that is? What's the hour of code effort?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, the hour of code is a effort from a nonprofit. It's a combination of a couple folks coming together, but it's basically around Computer Science Education Week, December 9th through 15th, and they're just teaming with a lot of folks to do whatever they can to encourage the taking up of programming as a as a career.
Cool. I like the hour of code. It's like Genius Hour. Everything's going to become an hour of something.
Yeah, well, limited attention spans, right?
Hey, okay, so there's the link there. Thank you. Okay, anybody else has something they want to share they learned today? You can grab the microphone. You can type it on the board, this lonely whiteboard with one item here. Can't wait for the end of this sentence. I learned Shino glaze is difficult to get correct.
Shino.
Oh, what's Shino?
It's a glaze.
Thank you. Okay, so normally Tom DeBoer comes on. In addition to not having a huge crowd tonight, we're also missing Tom DeBoer, who would tell us about tomorrow's events, but we're just going to skip that. If you're going to something tomorrow as part of Connected Educator Month, we'd love to have you put it in the chat to share with others so they might know of something cool that's happening. It's fun to know what's coming up. I am curious as to people's responses. Connected Educator Month this year is significantly busier, and there's talk of sort of thinking about how you would do this year-round. And that, to me, sort of produced kind of a cognitive dissonance, right? I really love the activity, but it feels like, wow, a month is hard enough. Yeah, how overwhelming would that be? You think we could figure it out? You think we would figure out how to balance if there was a month of all of that going on? Connected Educator. Nice.
We'll just squish it all into 1 hour. You connect now, and that's it.
We need one of those brain caps that Audrey Waters always shows. So we need someone just to dump the information into our heads. Squish the educator method, yes. Okay, so let's go back, Sylvia, to you, and let's kind of explore, other voices and other ideas that are healthy to bring back to the conversation.
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. 30 years is such a short period of time. I mean, and then you stole the one person that I would mention, Seymour Papert. There's.
Well, tell about Seymour. I didn't mean to steal him from you. Go ahead and talk about him.
It's okay. We'll share. I think Papert has been an incredible influence on educators anyone who's thinking about computers in the classroom has a legacy from Seymour Papert, whether they know it or not, because almost everyone who's influenced in the field, who's used any kind of programming language, this is a legacy from Seymour Papert, who saw the computer as a place where children could, as he said, learn to speak math in a math land, just like people in France learn to speak French naturally and fluently, because they would have the tools to use mathematical language, to do science experiments with the computer as a partner, not as a teacher, not as a videotape of a lecture, but the computer as a design partner, as a extension for your brain. Alan Kay was right at his side, and Alan Kay said, the computer is like a piano whose music is ideas. Both are overwhelmingly brilliant people. I swear, I saw the word overwhelming and I said the word overwhelming. Isn't that strange? There's so many people who are at the forefront of education reform who are completely not technology oriented, like Jonathan Kozol and Deborah Meyer. I saw Deborah Meyer this weekend, and her voice on how we have to look at public schools to preserve democracy is so strong, and she's so right, and she's so brilliant. It doesn't have anything to do with computers, and yet it has everything to do with education reform and the kinds of things we want to have happen in the classroom. Alfie Kohn is another one. Him taking a look at what's going on with the corporate reform, that's going on right now, and really focusing on what happens to real kids in real classrooms. David Perkins' book is great. I mean, there's people doing amazing things with music education. Dudamel came from the Venezuelan Youth Orchestra. He's the conductor now in LA, and they're building a whole series of opportunities for young people to play amazing music all through our city. I think there's so many people doing amazing work, and I think connected educator hopefully goes beyond just connecting digitally, but connecting ideas and connecting things like the idea of democracy being parallel with the idea of the maker movement in classrooms that I think are very, very profound.
So we have this really mixed legacy of democracy, this heritage, because we've talked about this several times in the cafe, right? And Dewey kind of plays into this as well. We weren't actually established as a democracy. The founding documents of the country came from people who believed that democracy led to tyranny. And we have moments in our history when democracy was purposefully curtailed. And the progressive era is actually one of those moments, right? After the 1890s and muckraking journalism, there was this sense, we have too much democracy, we have to control it. Then you've got the 1960s and this sense of sort of too much, an excess of democracy, the Trilateral Commission says. How do we feel about this digital democracy? Is it actually a good? I think it is. And if it is a good, what will it have to overcome in order to be something that we actually should use to transform our culture rather than kind of going back to reducing democracy?
Wow, the STEM ship really sailed, didn't it?
Bring us back. You can ignore the question.
Yeah, bring it back to STEM. I see democracy in very simple terms. I see, it being part of the public participation, and we see schools as places to segregate kids. And that's just the opposite of what they need to be doing. Schools need to be integrated with the community and participating in the democratic space of the community. And everyone knows I'm not talking about politics or Democrat, Republican, but, you know, having kids feel like they have a say in their own lives. Starting with the place that they spend a lot of time, kids having a say about what goes on in their own school. Everything from governance to, you know, decisions about what's going on. That's not to say we just sort of stand back and the kids wander around and discover the Pythagorean theorem. That's not at all what I'm talking about. You know, that's what teachers are for. That's why professional educators are so important to help structure experiences for young people to get their feet wet in small exercises in democracy so they're ready for bigger exercises in democracy. You know, having choice and agency in the kinds of experiences and experiments and that they do in the classroom is just a small part of it. It's just, but that's sometimes not even happening.
Okay, so Sylvia's just painted a really nice picture of the influence of schooling for democracy. Jackie says yes to agency. Okay, I have a question, Jackie. So do you think it's that vision of education that will drive us, or is it the fact that when my daughter has a cell phone, she actually has an amount of agency I never had as a child on the telephone? My parents always knew who was calling. It was very public when I was on the telephone. She can listen to music that I have no idea she's listening to. My music was always out in the open. Is there a degree to which, no matter what we say, the technology actually drives us toward agency?
Yeah, that's what, and my big push is everybody has a voice these days. Everything's open, so my big thing is, and I tell teachers that they're no longer the gatekeepers to information, and they're no longer the gatekeepers to having the kids connect. And so we might as well take that movement and work with it. You know, Jack, I don't know if you've had him, Steve, Jack Andraka, who did pancreatic cancer. He was on 60 Minutes, the 16-year-old. I don't know if you saw that piece. Did anybody? Yeah, I agree about the cheerleaders. Yeah, he's awesome. And you know where he learned it? He learned it from Wikipedia and what else? Google. And his science teacher got angry at him because he wasn't paying attention in science class when he made the discovery about pancreatic cancer. And we're on Twitter together, so I communicate with him, and what an amazing young man. So to answer your question, Steve, they're doing it. The kids who have, you know, Nicole, and I don't know how to say his last name. You guys know who I'm talking about. I think you've had him on. Nicole Goyo or something. And the other, there you go. And the guy who started Student Voice, they're doing it, Steve. And as they get more savvy, they're going to say, you know what, we're going to do it with or without you teachers. We prefer to have some adults along, but it's going to happen. And I want to go along. I love that that's in my Twitter stream and that I could communicate with him and he answers me. Here's this brilliant kid. He's starting a genius club for other kids. And so they are doing it. And as young kids grow up and have these other young people as role models, you know, the kid who wanted a easy bake oven that wasn't pink for her brother, she went on change.org and got them to do it. Another two girls who got 17 magazine to stop airbrushing their models. They're doing it. And sadly, it's the more savvy kids, and it's the kids who have those resources at home that's still a divide. And that's the part that worries me more than anything, are the kids who don't have the technology at home, don't have the wherewithal, that I think technology affording skills, just like wealthier schools afford skills that some of the lower income kids aren't getting. And that's what I fear more than anything. My thing is, show them the possibilities and get out of their way. We stand in their way too often. Like when I teach my Maker Ed or when I teach anything, it's, yeah, that's what I think schools purpose is now, Kathy, is to make sure everybody is to level the playing field and give kids the opportunities, not the content by standards, but opportunities to grow and learn and be self-directed learners. Because we're in this, like I said, John Dewey would have a heyday. We're in this perfect storm of kids being able to be self-directed learners, and are we helping them learn those skills or grab onto those opportunities? So I hope that addressed what you were trying to say, but I think they are doing it without us, and they prefer us to help be with them. I'm doing this every month I meet with teens. Talk about a great example. And it's called Cafe Scientific, and we get a scientist in. This lady from Los Alamos started, a scientist. They do a 20-minute talk that's designed for teens. Teens get to do a Q&A. We do a hands-on. We have food. The kids love it. They like being with mixed ages, but not if they're being told what to do, how to do, and where to do it. Then they don't like it. So it has to be more peer-to-peer with an adult just being a little bit more experienced to show them some ways.
So it feels like this is really in your wheelhouse, right? The whole tech and kids and Gen Yes. Did you have a perspective on this?
Well, I think that a lot of people make the mistake of hearing the word student voice and think that it's about kids talking, or even adults listening to kids, which it is partially. But I think the real power of student voice is always rooted in action. When kids can articulate what it is that they not only know but what they're doing, I think it really gets to the power. And I think, a lot of times we condescend to kids and we say, oh yeah, we're listening to you, come and join our panel, but then nothing actually happens. No change happens. They're listened to, but student voice, I think, goes much deeper. And the word agency is the perfect word. You can't teach a kid to be empowered. You have to give them something to do and real responsibility. And the thing that they do has to be valuable to the community. And this, it wraps right back around to citizenship. The definition of citizenship is being a member of a community. And that's a two-way street. It's not this digital citizenship where it's the rules of what you're not going to do. Digital citizenship should be being a member of a digital community that values what you do, you provide value to the community, and the community values you back. That means they have to be doing something real. That means they have to be doing something that's, in school there are real things they could do, but it has to be real and it has to be valuable. And kids know the difference. They know the difference between a worksheet and, creating a website for a nonprofit organization. The difference is night and day. Authentic problems and real world problems, I think, are at the heart of what we're trying to do, and the heart of democracy.
Okay, so we've really sort of blown past the sort of organizing that we had related to this. So the idea was at this point to kind of shift gears and to allow each of you to talk about something that you're passionate about. You've done that, but I'm wondering if there's anything else, any other ideas you're playing with, that you're thinking about that are kind of still in working stage, but that might be interesting for us to hear where and how you're working through them. So, Jackie, are you in the middle of working through any kind of new ideas?
Oh, Steve, always. I mean, that's like forever. So yeah, part of it, we talked a little bit about this at ISTE, is this idea of, we're taught, Carol Dweck and growth and fixed mindsets, and that I'm listening to teachers, and I'm a teacher educator, I have student teachers, and I know what they're up against. But this idea of, I have to teach to the test, I have to go by curriculum, I have to do this and I have to do that, sounds like a really fixed mindset, attitude of learned helplessness. And I want to, I really want to shift that into a growth mindset. We're talking about that with kids. Thanks, Kelly. But I'd love to see the teachers develop that mindset. So I was at a professional development, like I said last week, and we talked and connected educators about changing PD so that it's just in time, just on demand, which I agree, but I think in-services are valuable if they could be designed right. So I have this idea, the thing I'm struggling with, so you're not going to hear anything with any clarity, is how can we design and how can teachers have their own agency? That's the thing that we're talking about today, but how can teachers take their own agency, saying, even before an in-school PD, this is what I want to learn. What are you going to bring to the table? The really nice thing about the PD workshop I did in Idaho was there was 6 or 7 options for teachers in 3-hour blocks, so they could pick the option that more closely aligned to them for 2 days. But they were asking, why aren't they taking it back to the classroom? And transfer of learning is always a difficult thing. So again, with teachers' agency, have them come in with specific goals and then have them follow up in the classroom and have some accountability built in where they're taking agency and they meet with groups and saying, this is what I'm doing in my classroom based on the PD. But again, it's for me, instead of having professional development often given to teachers who don't want it, how can it be redesigned so teachers are going into that growth mindset and having their own agency to grow the way they need to and want to grow.
This is why I actually wonder if Illich doesn't have some real relevance, right? Because it feels to me like the technology is subverting the institution. And how do you work together when you're not conforming to the institutional boundaries? But Sylvia, what's your reaction to that?
I don't think you can have empowered students if you don't have empowered teachers. I just, bottom line, you can't pretend that if your teachers feel powerless, that they're going to somehow magically empower students. And I just don't see any other way around it. I've been thinking on my own a little bit about, I guess the issues of gender have kind of come to the fore for me a little bit, and wondering if it's really about gender or if it's just about different learning styles. And if it's just about learning styles, which, I don't think people quite, understand learning styles. I'm not even sure they exist, and yet I know that there's an issue with gender, and especially with STEM. I know that there's, the way we look at girls in society has a lot of, issues. Women too, women in technology, jobs too. But I'm not sure where I want to go with it. Nobody wants to be whining, and people don't take you seriously. It's a women's problem. I just trying to figure out where I want to go with that, or just skip it entirely and say everyone's an individual.
I really appreciate the voices that have been so clear about the tangible value of diversity, right? So, again, it's I'm in a different position. I'm the one that you would say to, well, do you have enough women in this panel, or whatever it is. But it feels to me as though when you come at it from the angle of the significant importance of having different ways of thinking and different ways of doing things, then it doesn't necessarily have to be a gender thing. It has to be a realization of the value of differences and the value of different ways that people contribute. And the book I really liked in that regard is called The Click Moment by Franz Johansson. And if you haven't read it, it became, and the Medici Effect he wrote before that. But sort of this idea of just how important it is to have different styles and different ways of doing things. Does that hurt the issue too much?
Yeah, I don't know. I worry that this idea of everyone has a different learning style has just been devalued into kind of a parody, and there's no scientific basis behind this, which doesn't interest me. I worry that it just sort of waters it down into just happy talk. We're all different, hooray! I'm not interested in Happy Talk Solutions.
Yeah, I probably haven't done it justice because, I mean, he makes a very tangible case.
And I haven't read that book in particular, so
no, but I mean,
I'm not
just in
saying
terms
that
of the
book.
idea maybe also that you actually are not going to succeed if you don't find ways to bring very different people together because you will create a bubble and you'll miss opportunity. It's probably not a fair addressing of the gender issue, though. Okay, so 15 minutes to go. Let's take a quick little break here and have the audience tell us what they think are some things they've been thinking about. So if you have a topic you'd like us to cover or talk about, just put a note in the chat. And if you want to put your Twitter handle in front of that note, it can be fun for people. Oh, look, I'm driving people away by asking.
You
So
did.
what are some wondering that you're having?
Experiential. See, that's why people don't like my workshops. I'll go, this is hands-on, and they get up and leave when I tell them it's going to be hands-on.
Yeah, the scariest thing you can ever say in a conference session is like, turn to your neighbor. Everyone goes, whoosh. So.
Joyce is typing. Not
Come on,
really
Joyce.
Clever, Joyce. Very clever. Okay, so let's think of one sort of way we could kind of wrap up here, something that would be sort of fun to talk about, the awkward silences. There's an art.
Here's an idea. How about we talk about STEM?
Yes. Okay, so what have we not talked about with STEM that you would like to talk about?
Okay, I'll start. I think that a lot of people get like project-based learning and Maker Ed and, you know, kind of differentiated, digital, blah, 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 but they sort of give up when they get to science and math because science and math is scary and a lot of teachers really don't understand it, so they're even more dependent on the curriculum and they feel less capable of riffing off of the curriculum. Like an English teacher wouldn't hesitate, like making up a topic for kids to write an essay about, but I don't think teachers have that same confidence when it comes to STEM subjects. And so STEM is like this outpost, and math may be the furthest out as far as very instructionist, very structured, and not experiential at all.
Jackie, any thoughts?
I always have thoughts. I don't think STEM, a lot of times, and the same thing I see as project-based learning, as Sylvia said, and differentiated instruction, people throw out those terms, but to really implement it, you have to have both a theoretical understanding, a contextual understanding, and an experiential understanding. And I always see project-based learning, they'll just say, okay, everybody get out a piece of construction paper and cut a square. That's project-based learning because they did something. Or it's Maker Ed because they did something. And I'm like, you need the whole package. Yeah, it's like it is a buzzword. It's like, but it's a full, like, that's why I think people are grabbing on to Sylvia and Gary's book because it does provide that full overview. And when I'm conceptualizing my STEM or STEAM, I always do STEAM because of my art background, is really, am I addressing all 5 of those aspects and what's the theory driving me and is it really an integrated piece because that's how life is. And when it is, it's rich and it's authentic and so is differentiated instruction and so is project-based learning. So I, like Sylvia, fear this, we throw them out and we say we're doing them, but if you really look at them, they're just more, I heard a kids panel, the student voice, one of the young people said, it's just another project, just like taking a test. That was so profound because he just saw it as another thing the teacher gave him to do because it didn't have all these, yes, Joyce, the context, the authentic, the student voice in it, whether they're interested in it. So, I mean, if you're just giving them projects, it's just, or a STEM exercise, to them, some of them, it just seems like another worksheet.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. I think, you know, it's definitely true. It's you know, research and studies on teachers show that they have less confident in themselves as mathematicians and scientists, especially elementary school teachers, than even the general population. And I think that sort of creates a problem in the classroom when if you're trying to do project-based learning, you have to have, like Jackie said, this sort of core content theoretical knowledge about where that project might go, and if the child starts in this direction, they're going to hit a mathematical concept that's just not appropriate. But you know what, if they did this slightly other version, they're going to hit something that's completely appropriate and completely within their grasp, and maybe just outside of their grasp. You know, that's a really hard call to take. And you also don't want teachers who are so good at the textbook math that that's all they can see. So, I mean, we're kind of stuck. I don't know what the solution is. I think we just have to keep kind of picking around the edges and offering new ideas and working with teachers. And I mean, that's why we're doing a lot of work with teachers, is just give them some experience where they can start to grasp that things don't have to be the same way they are now.
So who are you doing that work through Gen Yes? Are you doing that work through your own workshops? What kind of work is it?
So we're doing a lot of teacher workshops through the Invent to Learn book. Gary's in Pittsburgh right now. He just spent a day teaching kids programming. I think he said he had 50 kids, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, teaching them all to program at one time. He's definitely the jiu-jitsu master of that. You know, but teaching teachers too, and asking them to learn in a new way. Because if teachers don't learn this way, they can't figure out how to teach this way. You can't tell teachers how to teach. You have to give them experiences where they have epiphanies about their own classroom practices, because teaching is a journey. One of the things that I struggle with, Steve, you're also, you know, another thing that I'm kind of mulling over in my head is you can't schedule epiphanies. You know, you can't have a workshop with a teacher and say, okay, 3 o'clock, let's all have an epiphany. Someone might have it in the middle of the night. Someone has it the next day. I think there's a potential for online communities to continue the conversation afterwards. But, you know, when you're doing a teacher workshop and it's over at 3:30, you know, what happens next? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what's the most effective thing for schools to do after the workshop is over, that's going to allow for the teacher's journey to continue, the conversation to continue, those epiphanies to happen in a supportive community, so that the teacher can change their practice over a long period of time.
You know, what you just said sounded so much like what you said earlier about the student experience. I felt like in both cases you were saying it's really important to kind of cultivate the ground, you know, look at the conditions under which learning can take place, under which people can have those personal epiphanies, and provide as much support for them and recognize that they are the learning moment. I felt like you were talking about the exact same thing.
Yeah, that was my thing with the isolated and artificial PD is the same thing. Like, I love the line, I'm getting ready to tweet it, that you can't schedule epiphanies, but if teachers aren't invested without teacher agency, then they're not going to go for it. How can you have epiphanies if you're moaning about going to a professional development or a workshop? If you're not into it, you're definitely not gonna have the epiphany. And that's part of the PD model I was talking about earlier. There needs to be that support, that, especially with technology for teachers who aren't using it, the support, the teacher saying, I wonder if, in a community going in, try this, try that, or the teacher coming back saying, I did it, and having those epiphanies and having an audience, authentic audience, to hear about the epiphanies, because too often the teachers who are really getting into it, like when I was doing this with my gifted ed, I got pushback from other teachers going, why is she having the kids go out in the parking lot and do Alka-Seltzer rockets and all this? They were wondering why I was doing that with their kids in the pull-out rather than giving them worksheets. So it's a lonely life. Epiphanies, if your epiphanies aren't like everybody else's epiphanies, you're going to be really lonely.
Sylvia, was that parallel that I saw a part of what you were saying?
Well, absolutely, and in fact, you know, one of the great moments that I saw a teacher have, and this was in our 4-day summer institute, Constructing Modern Knowledge. You know, the teacher came in, and there's always an arc to the 4 days where people struggle and then, you know, figure things out. And she came in and she said, you know, yesterday was a terrible day. I hated my group. We bit off too much. I was ready to quit. I didn't understand what was going on. And I got up and I walked outside. I got a cup of coffee. I looked at the trees, took a deep breath. And when I came back, my group welcomed me. They missed me. We had good ideas. All of a sudden, things started clicking. And then she said later that night, it dawned on her, when do I give my kids time to go out and take a walk? When do I give my kids time to have a cup of coffee? Now, you probably don't want to give your second graders coffee, but the metaphorical coffee break, I think for that teacher, that was a huge learning moment. That had nothing to do with wires or programming or whatever they were, you know, building a website or whatever. It had to do with her taking her personal, that learning epiphany, and being able to say, now that I've had that, how am I going to structure my class so there's breathing time for kids? So kids want to take a step back from their work and say, is it right? Is it good? I'm going to change this, like a painter does. I think those kinds of experiences, you know, that's an exactly parallel experience for us teachers and students.
You know, you reminded me that Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow actually came from him observing painters. Right? I don't know if you know that story, but the whole idea was that he was observing painters at work when he kind of asked them questions about their process and what got them to the flow state. And so there's something, I think, sort of brilliantly full circle on understanding that's where that originally came from.
Can I just Can I tell one last story that says it all?
Course.
It's going to be a 30-second. I actually meet with student teachers at the bottom of the hours online. So I was subbing for a second grade class, and the snow in Santa Fe was coming down really hard, but they didn't cancel school, but they canceled recess, and all the second graders went, oh, can't we go out? And I thought, why not? Going back to the outdoors and epiphanies, they all put on their boots. I'm going to get choked up. There was about 20 of them. To watch them run in the snow, one after another, one would see something and they'd all follow them. They jumped in the snow and made snow angels. They caught snowflakes. And for me, watching these kids, and they didn't get along typically, but they were getting along beautifully, and the beautiful pure snow, and watching these kids, you can't plan for those. And those kids, I don't know if they'll remember it, but I could still picture it and taste it and smell it because it was so beautiful, because I just took it and said, let's just go for it. And the kids, they made magic that day. That's the best I can say about it.
Okay. Sylvia, Jackie, thanks so much. This was fun. Of course, I loved it. Appreciate both of you.
Well, thank you, Steve. You're always thought-provoking.
That's a backhanded compliment, isn't it?
No, I sincerely mean it.
Thank you. Thanks, Sylvia. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, J.G. Mack, Joyce Valenza, Michelle, and Tom. That was sure fun.
Oh,
even
everybody
if we were
appreciates you, Steve, and they should. You rock. You're such a great man. I'm happy you're in my
The
life.
model of the connected educator.
Really is.
Yeah.
And I love that idea about connected educators and pre-service teachers. That's a great topic.
Awesome. Have a great night. Take care, everybody. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Good night.